He was young, adventurous, and searching for something deeper than everyday life. One misty morning, he strapped his camping gear to a bike and rode straight into the wild, unforgiving wilderness of Olympic National Park in the Pacific Northwest. No one knew that ride would be the last time anyone saw Jacob Gray alive. Deep within the remote trails of the park, rangers later found his gear, neatly placed as if he had simply stepped away. No blood. No signs of a struggle. No footprints. Just an eerie silence. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Helicopters scanned the rugged terrain. Ground teams combed through forests. But Jacob had vanished. A full year later, strange sightings started surfacing. One man reported seeing someone matching Jacob's description near Indian Valley on April 5th. Another woman recalled spotting a figure pulling a red bike trailer up Fairholme Hill at 1 a.m. But it was the third sighting that gave investigators chills. A woman driving down the Soul Duck Hot Springs Road saw Jacob pedaling uphill, burdened with his gear, only 2 miles from Highway 101. When she returned hours later, she saw something so strange that she stopped to take a picture. Just 6.3 miles off the river road, Jacob's bike and trailer sat abandoned. The location made no sense. It wasn't ideal for camping, hiding, or resting. Everything lay in plain sight, just 10 yards from the road and 20 feet from the icy, fast-moving Soul Duck River. A tarp had been spread out with camping supplies arranged carefully around it. But the most haunting detail? 4 arrows stabbed into the ground, pointing perfectly east to west, right beside the tarp, as if marking something. Or warning someone. The rangers arrived the next morning. The bike was intact, tires full, gear untouched. It looked like someone had simply vanished into thin air. Some believed Jacob went down to fetch water and fell in, but the frigid meltwater from the Olympic Mountains would have taken him instantly. Yet no body, no trace, no clue ever surfaced. Jacob didn't just go missing. He disappeared, leaving behind questions, whispers, and those 4 cryptic arrows. Even more unsettling, no one had officially reported him missing for 3 days. Rangers assumed he was on a short hike, unaware his bike sat by the river. On April 7th, Ranger Brian Ray found a phone list among Jacob's belongings and called his sister, Mallory. The news struck like lightning. Jacob's father, Randy, immediately jumped into action, throwing a wetsuit in the truck and racing from Santa Cruz to Washington. He was pulled over doing 100 miles per hour in Oregon, but was let go after explaining the situation. When Randy and Mallory reached the park, they made a disturbing discovery. No large-scale search had ever been launched. Due to budget cuts, most law enforcement staff had been reassigned. The disappearance of Jacob Gray remained shrouded in silence, just like the forest that took him. As another case took priority, a nearby plane crash, the disappearance of Jacob Gray was quietly moved to the bottom of the list. His family was stunned. In a search and rescue mission, every second counts, and 5 precious days had already slipped away. Unwilling to wait, Jacob's father Randy took matters into his own hands. Dressed in protective gear, he dove into the freezing Soul Duck River, searching behind waterfalls, beneath log jams, anywhere a body might have been trapped. The icy water seized his breath, but he kept diving, again and again, driven by one desperate hope, to find his son. But frustration grew. Olympic National Park seemed to operate like its own private nation, bogged down by red tape. Outside rescue teams weren't allowed in without official approval. The Coast Guard, just minutes away by helicopter, was denied. Cadaver dog units were offered and rejected. Even sanctioned park search crews failed to show. It wasn't until Jacob's relative, Annalise, confronted Ranger Ray and demanded a real search that she got a simple response: "Okay." But nothing changed. Meanwhile, Randy continued alone. With soggy socks inside a rain suit, trench foot creeping in, he tore through thorny Devil's Club plants until his gloves shredded and his hands bled. But he never once complained. Every day without Jacob's body was another day he clung to the hope that his son might still be out there. But questions kept piling up. Why had Jacob told people he was heading east, toward Vermont, only to end up going west without telling anyone? Why was his bike left in such a visible spot? And what was the meaning of the 4 arrows embedded in the ground near his gear? From where Jacob's bicycle was found, the Soul Duck River winds 78 miles to the Pacific Ocean. Experts said if he had fallen in, The furthest his body could have traveled was about a mile. In April, the river becomes a death trap, fast, freezing, and littered with deadly logjams. Nearly a week after the bike's discovery, a mountain rescue team finally arrived. Near the riverbank, they found evidence suggesting someone had switched from hiking boots to running shoes. A moss-covered rock showed signs of a possible slip. 30 yards downstream, there were hints someone may have scrambled away. But tracking in the wilderness isn't an exact science. The clues were speculative at best. 2 cadaver dogs later, locked in on a logjam downstream. Their handlers believed they were close to something. Divers plunged into the debris multiple times, but found nothing. The scent could have drifted from any source along the water. Still, Randy pushed on. He didn't trust anyone else to be thorough enough. Strapping himself to ropes, he lowered into hidden pools behind waterfalls, paddleboarded down isolated river branches, and searched every cave, every shadowy corner, places most rescuers wouldn't even consider. If Jacob was out there, Randy was determined to bring him home, no matter what. The search was slowly destroying him. Randy Gray's body bore the toll of every fall, every rock strike, every cold night spent in the wilderness. He rarely ate, surviving mostly on water from the river. He pushed himself past the brink until his legs gave out beneath him, but he couldn't stop. Every pool of water became a possible grave, every hidden corner a lead he had to chase. Then came a sliver of hope. A pair of Burnside shorts matching Jacob's size was discovered downstream. They were rushed to the Seattle crime lab for DNA testing. But the result? Negative. Another dead end in a case already drowning in them. By this point, park authorities had downgraded Jacob's case to passive search status, meaning no new resources would be deployed unless fresh evidence came to light. For Randy, that was unthinkable. If they wouldn't search for his son, he would. Alone. So he made a choice that would change the rest of his life. He shut down a successful contracting business back in Santa Cruz, sold the family home, bought a diesel truck and a camper rig, and moved, permanently, to the Olympic Peninsula. The river search expanded into the forests, the cliffs, the mountains. Jacob's sister, Mallory, had once given him a set of throwing knives for Christmas, but they were never found among his abandoned gear. Neither were his mountaineering crampons, warm jacket, or large hiking pack. Could Jacob have intentionally walked away from his bike? Was it possible he never entered the river at all? More disturbing thoughts crept in. Randy began considering darker possibilities. Human trafficking, cult abduction. Jacob, a handsome young man with a past in modeling, might have been targeted. What if someone lured him off the road in the dead of night, asking for help? Desperate for answers, Randy began roaming the streets of Port Angeles by night, speaking with addicts and the unhoused, hoping someone had seen his son. Dozens of leads came in. None of them panned out. Jacob had vanished like smoke. Mallory offered a different theory. Maybe Jacob chose to disappear. She said he had been lost, spiritually, mentally. He didn't know what he wanted in life, who he wanted to be. The state of the world had weighed heavily on him. Maybe this bike trip had never been about escape from the modern world, but from himself. The family had long worried about Jacob's mental state. The divorce had hit him hard. Losing his childhood home had shattered him. His mother, Laura, recalled that he'd struggled with growing up, with identity, with belonging. This trip across the country had been meant to center him, give him clarity and a renewed sense of direction. But hidden signs hinted otherwise. Among Jacob's belongings was a Bible, marked with an ominous verse, Isaiah 34:14. Desert creatures will meet with hyenas, and the wild goat will bleat to its kind. The night creatures will also settle there. What was Jacob searching for in such dark scripture? Still, Randy wouldn't give up. He bought a collapsible bicycle and journeyed to the San Juan Islands, checking organic farms where Jacob might have found work under an assumed name. Again and again, he returned to the Soul Duck River, searching a 12-mile stretch more thoroughly than any other human ever had. Jacob Gray had disappeared, but Randy Gray refused to let go. By August 2017, the mountains had already been combed once, but Randy was still out there, living on the road, chasing shadows. He drifted from one forest pullout to another, sleeping in his camper, going wherever the trail, real or imagined, led him. What most would consider a rich man's dream, total freedom, endless travel, had turned into his personal nightmare. He had lost his son. Nothing else mattered. That month's full moon glowed red through the smoke of massive wildfires drifting down from British Columbia. Randy found shelter at an unlikely place, an old research outpost once used by Bigfoot investigators. The building was cluttered with plaster casts of giant footprints, charging stations for headlamps, and crates of old rifles. The owners opened their doors to aid his search. Derek Randalls and the Olympic Mountain Response Team hiked nearly half a mile beyond even their own topographic charts, scanning terrain no one else dared to reach. They knew better than anyone. Searching these mountains was like trying to find a ghost in a cathedral of endless trees. But they didn't stop. For 4 relentless months, Randy searched 12 to 14 hours every single day. His body was breaking down, but his will never cracked. "I didn't plan for any of this," Randy said. "Jacob was my best friend. You think I wanted to be out here?" He kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking led to dark places. He still spoke about Jacob in the present tense. Laura, Jacob's mother, had started speaking of him in the past. That quiet shift in grammar was heartbreaking. "I was going to give Jacob this camper," Randy once said. "He would have loved it. We could have strapped the surfboards on top and just lived by the beach." The search had consumed Randy's life, but he couldn't imagine giving up, not when his son might still be out there. Alive. Lost. Waiting. Then on Friday, August 10th, something surfaced. A team of biologists studying alpine marmots stumbled across something near the summit of a ridge above Hull Lake, 5,300 feet above sea level and at least 15 miles from where Jacob's bicycle had been abandoned. There, in a stunning but isolated spot far from any official trail, they discovered human remains. The location was so remote it begged more questions than it answered. In April 2017, the entire area would have been buried in snow, dangerously prone to avalanches. How had Jacob ended up so far from his gear, so high up the mountain, when logic said he should have followed the river downhill toward safety? Rangers contacted Randy, instructing him not to ascend the ridge. "Let the professionals do their job," they told him. But Randy wasn't the type to obey orders that conflicted with a father's instinct. "When does a father stop being a father?" he asked. Then he went up anyway. He was descending from the ridge above Deer Lake when he crossed paths with another group of rangers performing CPR on a 29-year-old woman from Iowa who had collapsed from cardiac arrest. Randy didn't hesitate. He joined the effort, taking turns compressing her chest. One of the rangers beside him had just helped carry Jacob's remains down from the mountain. Despite their efforts, the young woman didn't survive. The official cause of Jacob Gray's death? Undetermined. The Clallam County coroner confirmed the remains through dental records. Jacob had been carrying a lighter, warm clothing, high-calorie food, and various supplies, but no note, no explanation, just silence. And one final, unspeakable mystery. Jacob had everything he needed to survive: his grandfather's Bible, warm clothes, food, fire-starting tools, yet somehow, he didn't. Hypothermia may have claimed his body, but that only explains how he died, not why. What drove a strong, capable young man to perish alone on a barren ridge, miles from where anyone was even looking? The questions that haunted the early days of the search have now taken on new urgency. Why did Jacob tell people he was heading east only to pedal west without explanation? Why leave his bicycle and belongings in plain view, unlocked and undisturbed? Why those 4 arrows driven into the earth with eerie precision? Was he trying to leave a message? A code? Or were those arrows never meant for anyone else, only for himself? What troubles the heart most is this. Jacob's body was eventually found on an open slope, fully visible from the air. If helicopters had been deployed the day his gear was discovered, might he have been rescued? Could he have still been alive? The answers may lie not in search grids or topographical maps, but in the mind of the boy himself. Dr. Robert Coaster, an expert in lost person behavior and author of Search and Rescue Psychology, offers a chilling truth. Children tend to go uphill when lost, and Jacob, despite his age, was searching for something. Something spiritual, something internal. Jacob had marked dark verses in his Bible, scripture about desert beasts and night creatures. His family had long worried about his mental health, the divorce, the loss of the home where he grew up, the uncertainty of early adulthood. It all pressed in on him. He was trying to find himself again. Maybe this wasn't a cross-country ride at all. Maybe it was a pilgrimage, an inward journey that took him outward, into wilderness, into silence. Perhaps the arrows weren't a signal for rescuers. Maybe they were Jacob's own compass pointing toward his personal summit, a path into the higher ground, away from civilization, toward something he couldn't name. Randy had sensed it all along. He would go up, he said. Most adults lost in the wild go down, toward people. Jacob went the other way. And in the end, maybe Jacob did find what he was looking for, on that lonely, windswept ridgeline above Hull Lake. Whether it was peace, meaning, or simply release, we'll never know. But his story reminds us that the deepest mysteries aren't always about what happened to someone, but what was happening within them. Out there, in the vast silence of the Olympic wilderness, Jacob Gray found something the world could never give him. And in doing so, he left behind a family forever searching. Not just for him, but for understanding, because the story of Jacob Gray isn't just a missing persons case. It's the story of a young man lost in a noisy world, who sought answers where no one thought to look. Not in a page, not in a trail, but in the quiet voice that echoes only in the mountains. And maybe, just maybe, that was the voice that finally made sense.